Hello and welcome to another episode of Jaxon Talks Everybody with me, your host, Aaron Mashbitz, aka Jackson Stone. We're still going with the pretend name here on the podcast, but that's okay. This is episode 133 of the podcast. We are just rocking and rolling here. Pumped for this episode, really pumped to connect and get to know this person a little bit better. So Donovan, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me in 133 episodes.
Yeah, right?
That
Wild.
is impressive. That is impressive.
Yeah, I had one goal at the beginning of the year when it came to this podcast, and it was just be consistent. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to release an episode every single Tuesday. That was my goal. And so that was 4 a month, and then it transitioned to 5 a month, and now we're at 6 episodes a month.
Wow, look at that growth. That's dope.
So, and I got my Spotify rap numbers as a podcaster, and I was like blown away.
Yeah.
So it's really quite cool to see anyone take the time to listen to a conversation that's longer than 10 minutes, right? Because we're on, you're on TikTok, I'm on TikTok. We all have these short form video content, and we just assume that people only want to listen to 6 seconds of a thing,
Mhm.
right? But then you look at all these podcasts. You've been on some really amazing podcasts lately. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I obviously do a podcast, and people are hungry for these long
Mhm.
form
Mhm.
conversations. They really are, because you can get the full complexity, not the full complexity, but more of a complexity of a human than just seeing them for 6 seconds. And I like the 6 second videos because you can get like a snapshot boom, and then it makes you want to go look for more. But people are really hungry for actual knowledge, like diving into like really serious topics, and they want to hear stories.
Yeah.
And I don't think we give people enough credit, because everyone's like, short term gratification, impulse. And there's a lot of that
Mhm.
stuff. Of course there is, right? But there also is a lot of people who are very hungry for like exceptional conversations. And then they're transferring that into their own life, and they're just having
Mhm.
podcasts that aren't ever recorded. And those are the best ones, because that's real, genuine conversations. So yeah, not to
Do you think
just
they take
start this podcast off on a quick rant, but yeah.
but it's true though. I honestly like when my TikTok kind of blew up in the first place, it was really weird to me because TikTok videos are very quick and it's very like grab your attention. But the work that I do with kids, even a minute seemed really quick to me, where I was like, how can I show like this full conversation? You need the full context. And so I used to get kind of down on myself around that too, where it's like, okay, I have to figure out how to grab somebody's attention in 6 seconds, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
2 seconds. And no one wants to see that long form stuff. But what I found, especially through podcasts, and through lives and in these kind of like discussion based spaces, that people take a lot of value from it, just like people take value from those quick videos, which I'm not hating on. I just haven't figured out the formula yet, but it's like people really appreciate these things, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people around like the actual value that they're taking from these longer conversations, and it makes me feel really honored, like you said, that people will sit and be a part and listen to these things and think about it and integrate it and question it and kind of grow from these conversations. So one of the things I'm really excited about is I, until more recently, haven't been able to talk to a lot of men about this work. And I think that that is something that is so important, especially because of my desire to support boys and their emotional intelligence and their mental health. And obviously, I want to support all kids, but just recognizing that there's some extra work that needs to be done with this population. It gives me a lot of hope to know that these kind of spaces exist. As I was listening to your stuff, it was like, yes, yes, I want to talk about this. I want to talk with this man.
Yeah. I have a deep love for, I don't know if this sounds weird or not, but for the growth of young boys. Like, because it's so important. Like,
Mhm.
it's so important. And I think we're going to get into this, and I want to backtrack in a second, but like, there is a bit of a, there is a bit of, like, I think a little bit of hate towards just the overall men in today's society. And young boys get fed that information, and then they're gonna pick which direction they're gonna go. They're gonna take a path, and there's a lot of paths, a lot of people on these platforms who are gonna tell them which path is best for them, and they're not
Yeah.
gonna have the discernment at a young age to understand which one to go on. And so
Mhm.
if we as older adults, males and women, play a huge part in this as well, of encouraging them to grow into their best version through having solid role models who embody these strong characteristics of vulnerability and love and compassion and also toughness, right? You need some of that as well. The world is very hard. It is very, very hard. And you have to have toughness. But that toughness also means being able to ask for help and saying that you need a break, and having vulnerability, which is just a combination of courage and truth, which is just like
Yeah.
the ability to have genuine, authentic things in relationships. And so it's quite important. It's actually one of the most important things, because the little kids and the young boys that we are coaching, talking to, or in school now are the ones that are going to change the whole world soon.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so if we want the world to be in good hands, it's our job to encourage and distill these values and be the best sort of role models we can be. Not modeling perfection by any means, because we're not modeling that. That's impossible. But
Mhm.
modeling this sort of go for it attitude, this try attitude, and keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up and choosing to learn and choosing to learn and grow and understand and be curious, and then kind of blossom into your own, where you can do the same for someone else who's coming up in
Mhm.
the same way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're in this really interesting age too, where a lot of traditional values are being kind of questioned,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that strength a while ago looks different than strength does now. And so one of the things that I do with my kids is like really try to have them define for themselves, what does strength look like?
Yeah.
Right. So I had one of the boys I worked with, he was feeling really upset and was articulating that he like wanted to cry but couldn't,
Mm.
right? And it was just like it's weak to cry. And so I had a close relationship with the student. So I asked him and I was like, you've seen me cry before, right? Like I've had moments where I've gotten emotional from being touched, or, like feeling grateful for you all. And I was like, do you consider me weak? And he was like, no, but that's you. Right. And so then I kind of try to bring his attention to, you have this ability to define for yourself what strength looks like. And
Mm.
if you're being told that strength looks this way and that doesn't sit right with you, but you're seeing examples of strength in other people, you can define that for yourself, and trying to help them understand that strength doesn't look the same way that it used to look, and that it is thinking about things like asking for support or being vulnerable and open, or being emotional where you feel safe, right? Like those things are redefining what strength looks like, and just bringing that attention to kids, bringing that to a kid's attention, I think is a really powerful moment.
Yes, it's incredibly powerful. And I want to get into more of that. And I have some questions to ask you as well. But since I sort of just started this off on a sort of a tangent, and then kind of just we went right in, which is awesome. I want to backtrack into the question that I ask everyone that starts off this podcast. It's the theme of this pod. So I want to ask you, and like you said, it's really important that I think two males are having this conversation to sort of embody this to whoever's listening. So, Donovan, how are you doing, man? Like, how are you doing, really?
I am exhausted. I think in the past couple of years, I've experienced a type of exhaustion I've never experienced before, which is physical and emotional and spiritual. It doesn't matter how much sleep I'm getting, I'm waking up still feeling really exhausted. And the past few weeks have been really, really tough. And it's interesting that this conversation lands today because I'm about to go on like a mental health break from my work. But just how much it's been difficult, or how difficult it's been for me to get to this point where I had to say, like, there is no pushing through this, right? Pushing through this is going to just take me out of the game. I have to like be here for myself. And so I'm about to go on break in like a few hours, basically for like the next couple of weeks. And I'm just really excited about it because I've been struggling. It's been really tough. And doing the work that I'm doing, I often feel like I'm not allowed to share that, but I think it is a part of it. I think it's really important to be open and vulnerable and say, I'm not doing well, or I need support, or I've hit my limit, because I want to model that for kids, where it's like when you've hit your limit, it's okay to take time for yourself. It's okay to ask for support. It's okay to set boundaries with people, but it's tough, especially as like living in this belief for a long time, like the society pushes on us, it's difficult to push through those kind of self-limiting thoughts and self-limiting beliefs to really understand that taking time for yourself, supporting yourself, caring for yourself is really self-expansive, you know.
Yeah, what were some of your like personal roadblocks that you had to cross to try and almost force yourself to taking a break? Because I experienced some of the same thoughts and feelings about taking a break and, getting off my phone or doing any of sorts of things. But what are your personal roadblocks there?
I've been struggling with this deep, deep belief of I'm lazy. And
Mm.
it's something I'm actually reading this book right now by Dr. Devin Price called Laziness Doesn't Exist. And when I heard that title, I was like, oh, all right, wait a second, because I'm pretty sure I can be pretty lazy. But I started reading the book and I actually got really emotional in the introduction because I was like, oh shit, excuse me, oh crap, this is like about me, like this is about my life, right? And I think that this belief that I've had of like I'm lazy and I'm not doing it enough is because the path that I've been taking for my work just doesn't look like other people's paths. And so I often will feel like I'm not doing enough. Even like on the eve of the Today Show doing their story on me, I'm sitting here thinking like I'm not doing enough. And I'm about to be on the Today Show and I'm still believing that I'm being lazy. And so what the past few months I had all these huge things happen that are really big in my career. And Dono Friend, which is kind of like your Jackson Zone, it's like my kind of title that I would use for the work.
Yeah.
But what was happening, and I didn't realize this until I was in therapy, but what was happening is like Dono Friend was taking like 90% of my energy and capacity. And then Donovan was getting the last 10%.
Mm.
And 10% is not enough to like thrive. 10% is just surviving. And so when I wasn't working, I was sleeping a lot. I was isolating myself. I was like having a hard time with overeating or eating really bad foods or just like overindulging in things. And I was being really tough on myself about it, which is like, why aren't you being better in your personal life? But I didn't realize that I like didn't have the space and capacity to do that because so much of my energy was going into my work. Dono Friend was thriving, and then Donovan was barely surviving. So I took a few weeks off. I took a week off because I went to Canada to MC for my friend Sam Dimma's book launch. And there was a moment where I stepped outside and I took a week off. Like I was like, well, I'm going to be traveling. It's going to be tough to get a hold of people by coaching clients. Like I'm just not going to coach this week. And I think because I had that time off, everything really settled in. And I just started having those thoughts where it was like, I don't want to be here. I'm exhausted. I don't want to be like, I don't want to exist kind of feelings. And I have struggled with depression for a lot of my life. And I had a period in college where I was suicidal. And that's what those thoughts sounded like. But when it happened the last time, it was more gradual. I felt like I was able to track that journey of like, I'm disconnecting and I don't want to be, like, I don't want to have responsibilities and I don't want to be here. But this one just snuck up on me. It was like the second I put Donovan Friend down, Donovan was like, I'm ready to call quits. And so I knew that I had to take care of myself, but I didn't really listen to that voice. And I just jumped back into work after a couple of days off. And then I ended up getting COVID for the first time. And I'm, triple vaccinated and boosted, but I got sick. And instead of giving myself the time to recover, I gave myself a week and then I jumped right back in and put a ton of pressure on myself and had like a ton of deadlines for these big creative projects. And then I got the flu. And so for me, it was like, okay, spiritually, I'm not going to listen to the signs of the fact that I'm burnt out and that I'm tired, like physically, like to be able to get this sick back to back. It's just a huge wake up call that I'm not taking care of myself. Um, and so I had to really push through this lie of like, I'm lazy because one, I'm doing these things in my time off because I'm not giving myself enough space and time. And so of course I'm going to sleep. Of course I'm not going to have energy to be with my friends or to do things that I love. right? Is because I'm putting everything into Dono Friend. So that's what forced me to be like, I have to take a break because I've got these huge things I really care about. And it doesn't matter how much I care about these things or how good the work is. If I'm not taking care of myself, then I won't be here. I won't be here for the work. And that is something that has been really tough to grapple with.
Soaking that all in for anyone who's wondering about the pause. But I want to circle back first to the 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 college experience that you said with depression. Was that your first bout with that? How did you overcome it if you did? And just thoughts on that first.
Um, I had a lot of death in my life as a young person, starting from my dad when I was 6 or 7, all the way up to like one of my close friends when I was a senior in high school. And in between, there was just a lot of death. And because I got really good at surviving and kind of doing the things that were as expected of me. On the outside, it very much looked like, well, this kid is just having a teenage experience and he's fine. But I was miserable. And then you add the trauma of death on top of that, and adding things like substance abuse, it just got really bad. So by the time I got to college, I was acting out in a lot of really bad ways. And like I was harming people and it was a really tough time. I used to look back at that time and feel a lot of shame around how I was acting. And more recently, as I did more self-compassion kind of work, I understood that like that was a young person that had gone through a lot of trauma and hadn't gotten the mental health support and was finding ways to cope in the world to try to feel better, even if they weren't the best ways to do it, right? It was like me trying to take care of myself. But when I was in college, I didn't have access to that and I didn't have a lot of support around that. And I think it just got to a point where I just hated myself, like really, really hated myself. And it was so different from how I was received. I had lots of friends. Like I was a very like social person. I got good grades and I just didn't like who I was. And I was so deeply ashamed of who I was as a person that eventually I just decided like I didn't want to be alive and I didn't want to be myself. And so for about 3 months, I just started to disconnect from the world. I started to isolate from my friends, even getting into like actual fights with my friends to push them away. I got into huge fights with people in my family. I quit my job. I started like suicidal ideation and started thinking about like, a lot of the messaging around suicide. And what stopped me, because I had picked a day, but what stopped me is another friend in our friend group took his life and it was
Mm.
just completely shocking. No one was expecting it. No one had any idea that he was suffering the way that he was. I remember being intimidated by him, thinking that he was really strong and that he would see me and think that I was really weak. That's like the first thought I had around him as a person. And so when that happened, I had to deal with the consequences of suicide without it being me. And so having to see the aftermath, having to be a part of the aftermath, having to talk to his parents, having to talk to my friends and seeing everyone kind of struggling around. We didn't know. Is this our fault? Why didn't we do anything? I just knew I couldn't do it. I knew I could never do that to the people in my life, and I could never do that to myself. And I just like had a commitment to like I got to figure out how to live differently. Like I just can't keep going like this, but there is no other alternate. So I got to figure out some other way to do this. And that's when I started like learning about self-development and self-work in general. And then that became like the foundation for my desire to teach this stuff to kids, to teach promotive and preventive skills to kids.
First off, thank you for sharing. That means a lot.
Yeah, it's
That means a lot to me, and I think the people listening that you would open up like that.
yeah.
Second, I wrote a Twitter thread a couple days ago about the myth that suicide is selfish.
Mm-hmm. That's the
because
thing.
yeah. And so, for those that are listening to this episode, because your fans are friends of Donovan, I lost my big sister to suicide in 2018. And so that's why mental health, it became the most important thing in my life, talking about it, understanding it, learning it, breaking down the stigma, being a beacon of hope, light, all of the same sorts of work that we're doing. Basically, both of us are doing, just sort of in different spaces, maybe with different populations potentially, but maybe the same. But either way, and that sort of myth and misconception popped up a lot for me.
Mhm.
I think for the people that I talk to, that suicide is a selfish act. And when you look at it without really understanding at a very deep level, that's a plausible thing, of course, right? They weren't thinking about me, they weren't thinking about the people they loved. They weren't, of course they weren't.
Yeah.
Of course they weren't, because from an outsider who's never experienced that sort of emotional distress and pain,
Mhm.
this unbearable sense of pain that I don't want to die per se. I want this to not, I don't want to feel this way anymore. This fucking weight is tearing me apart from the inside out. I am deteriorating and no one can see it. I have friends. I smile. I still laugh. I still go to class. But I'm deteriorating on the inside. And that's what is consuming me. The darkness is consuming me. So I'm not thinking about anyone that loves me, any
Mhm.
good experience that I've had. That's gone. And so that's why, if you think about it at a real, like you try to understand how deeply unbearable this pain is when someone is attempting suicide or actually does die by suicide. This is what is happening. So it is not selfish. It's not weak, right? It's just the unfortunate circumstances of this unbearable amount of pain that just didn't that went unseen,
Yeah.
because the invisible is mental health. The invisible is mental health conditions, these silent killers of depression, despair, trauma, hopelessness, all of these things. And so it's important to understand that. And you can't fully grasp it unless you've ever felt those feelings or been right there with someone in the trenches, in the dark, feeling those experiences with them and pulling them out from that darkness. um, and so I also want to say that if anyone like yourself, Donovan, that has pulled themselves out of that darkness, you're a fucking legend. You're a
Mhm.
legend, because that's a hard pit to pull and crawl and just drag yourself out of, and then continue to keep moving forward, because those things don't just magically go away. You have to then put some action forth. And now you're at this point in your life where you're sort of feeling those feelings again, doing all this work that you've done, putting in the effort, the time, teaching, coaching, working on yourself, and still those feelings come up, because it's normal, it's natural to have these hard emotions. And so I feel very passionate about that, and wanted to express that for those that might be thinking about um, the idea that suicide is selfish.
Yeah, and I'm so first of all, I'm just so sorry for your loss. I have three brothers, and I can't imagine what that must be like. And I'm also, just really grateful that you took that and you're using it to help and using it to support people and create conversations that are really important. And I agree, that was like a really big thought of mine, and it helped me be really compassionate for people who are going through that. When I was struggling, it was like, this isn't selfish. Like this is all I have. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like you asking me to stay in this pain and suffering for your comfort. That feels selfish, and
Mm.
that's the thought process that I had. Was like, people think I'm being selfish, but in reality, I'm supposed to just stay because people love me, right? But I have to deal with this pain and this suffering, like not being able to look at myself in the mirror, and then having these conflicting realities of like people like loving me and caring about me. I wasn't like a solo person that was struggling. I was very lucky to have friends and family that loved and supported me, but in a lot of ways that almost made it harder because the reality that I felt on the inside did not reflect how people saw me. And I just shared this story for the first time recently, but when I was in high school, I won the superlative most likely to brighten your day. And I went to the bathroom and cried because I was just so weirded out and so shocked by that. Like I had been self-harming like maybe a few months before that. Like only a few people in my life knew it at the time. But it was like, how could people see me this way when I just look at myself and I hate myself, right? And what's wild is like not making space for myself, not getting the support that I needed. That's what happened to me as a young person that led me to getting to that place of suffering. But that's the same experience that was happening now, where it was like, I'm not giving myself the space, like, I'm not giving myself the support. And so when those thoughts came, I was able to immediately recognize it and be like, this is a huge warning sign. Like, this is a huge red flag. You have to listen to it, right? You have to listen to it. I don't identify with that, but I have to listen to it because that is a sign that something is not right. And the thing that's not right is like, I'm not doing well. And I have been trying really hard to teach kids how to take care of themselves because if you think about the weight of everything that kids are going through and the issues that they're going to be responsible for fixing, the things that we could be fixing as a society right now, but for whatever reason is not happening, they're going to inherit these problems. And so I see these kids who work so hard. You see these kids who have these huge causes, who want to do good, who want to help themselves, but are already losing sight of who they are because they found their work. That's what happened to me is after I left that time period, I started teaching this stuff to kids. And it was wonderful. And it was like, yeah, this is important. This is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. But I still didn't have a good relationship with myself. So now it was like, okay, at least I'm doing something positive, but I still treat myself like crap, right? And then it will come back and bite me in the ass. And that's what happened a few weeks ago is like it doesn't just go away, and I have to take care of that, especially knowing that I'm prone to these things and that this has been a history of mine. So it's like I want to teach kids to take care of themselves so they don't burn themselves down to the ground, and that's not selfish either, because if they're taking care of themselves, it becomes more sustainable for them to do this work, right?
Right. It's just like you see this so much in this type of work.
Mhm.
And it's on one side, it's extremely important to obviously find a purpose, a
Mhm.
meaning, right? We're searching for a meaningful, purpose driven life, right? We're not searching to be happy every day. That's not going to happen. And it's just not, it's not where it is, but a purpose driven, meaningful existence. But with that, we sort of almost lose track of everything else.
Mhm.
Like I come from a sports background. I played baseball in college, and then I became a professional wrestler. And to sort of reach any height in any sport, elite level in any sport, and business for that matter, you sort of have to become obsessed,
Mhm.
and nothing else matters. I didn't have friends in high school. I only had friends in college because we just happened to live close by and there was proximity, and alcohol get introduced in my life, but that's like a different story. But you just become one track focused and nothing else matters. Relationships sacrifice, grades get
Mhm.
sacrificed, everything. But sports, there's a part of that that is you have to have well-being, right? You have to
Mhm.
work out, you have to exercise, you have to eat right, or you're not going to perform your best. And so that sort of obsession can help. But we've seen some of these Olympic athletes who then get to the peak and they're like, I don't know what to do. My whole identity is lost. My mental health, I was depressed the whole time, all of this stuff. And so it's the same in this sort of work, right? We know what our purpose is. I want to help kids. I want to end mental suffering. I want to change the freaking world. And then we get so focused on this hyper focused on this very big lofty goal that's so daunting, but we're like, I'm going to tackle it anyways. And then everything else goes by the wayside. And all the advice that we're giving everyone else, we're not taking ourselves, because we can do more. We can do more. I'm fine. I can do more. I can do more. I can give. And then it's it. And then we basically fall flat on our face and we wonder what happened. And I felt, the exact same way. And it's like, okay, I need to circle back. I need to take a huge step back and realize that if I want to live this meaningful life and actually pursue my purpose in a way that's best for my well being, I have to do the things that I'm telling other people to do.
Yeah, I almost started crying during that because it's just, I think why these conversations are so important too is because a lot of times, especially people who put a lot of weight on their shoulders or people who have a lot of weight put on their shoulders, feel like they're the only people going through this,
Hmm.
right? And it normalizes that this is a common struggle that people deal with, and it makes me feel not so alone in that situation. But I was just listening to you talk, and I'm like, yeah, like that's it. Like I'm having weird health issues. I'm having health issues I've never had before. I'm having health issues that doctors can't diagnose. And it's like, this is not guaranteed, right? Like this vessel has to be taken care of. Like it doesn't matter how important my work is. If I'm stressed to the point of illness, like an illness can take me out, right? And I don't mean to be dramatic, but it's true. It's
Hmm.
true. It's stress hurts and stress harms so much. And it's like I feel very like almost sad for the younger me that felt like I had to push through. And I've had people in my life who have tried to stop me. And I've had people in my life, like the resistance I felt, I used to be like, well, I've had people tell me I need to chill out and blah, blah, blah. But like really thinking about the people, there's this woman named Patty Matheson, who was one of my like advisors for when I was teaching in grad school. And she pulled me into a room. She just told me that she got emotional. She was like, I'm worried about you. Like, I'm just worried about you. You're doing too much. You're taking on too many people's stuff. I was in grad school. I was teaching freshmen. I was teaching at an acting company. I was nannying two kids. And I was also running my own after school program. So I was literally taking care of all these kids. And then after that conversation with her, 3 months later, I failed out of grad school. I'd had to quit two of my jobs. I had to live in my car for 3 days. I had to give my dog up, right? Because I just let everything crash around me. And of course, I was doing these wonderful things, right? People were like, wow, you're helping kids. I got so exhausted that within a month, I had a seizure teaching, which I'd never had before. And then I got a concussion, right? And it's like I didn't, and I tried to push through. Where it was like you had these super serious injuries, and I'm like, I got to push through. I got a mission to do, and everything had to kind of burn down to the ground for me to take a forced break. And I still pushed myself into another situation where I had to be giving and taking, and I created a lot of trauma for myself, putting myself into positions to care for people when I didn't have anything to give. And it's wild to think that for so long I was blaming myself for being a human, for having limits. Um, when in reality, I should have been learning what those limits are. But I didn't have the space, I didn't have the tools and resources to do it. And you look at motivational stuff now, and I do coaching and stuff, but I sometimes get really stressed by some of the things that I see because we push this like get up and work and you have to keep going and never give up and hustle and grind. And I understand the importance of persistence and I understand the importance of hard work, but we're never talking about resting and we're never talking about recovering. If you go to the gym every single day and you're pushing your body every single day, you're going to collapse. Your body is going to break down. You're going to injure yourself. And it's the same thing of our spirits. You know what I mean? When we don't give ourselves time to relax and recover and recharge, eventually there will be a breakdown of the spirit. And we've seen this. We've seen this with brilliant artists and influencers and people who are doing great work in the world who have been taken out earlier than their time because they were pushing themselves so much. And it's like I had to build this relationship with myself where I've got to the point now where it's like if I decide to quit tomorrow, that's okay.
Hmm.
That's okay. I'm grateful for what the opportunities I've had, but if this work stops, I still continue. And I used to feel like I am this work, right? But it's me, and I get to decide what I'm putting myself into. And I want kids to have a relationship with themselves so they can treat themselves like they would treat a best friend, like they can take care of themselves because that is so crucial in thinking about mental health and thinking about how we treat ourselves and how we push ourselves. Like I would never push a student the way I push myself. I would never talk to a student the way that I would talk to myself about these situations. And that was one of the biggest gifts I had was a therapist saying, what would you tell a kid? If a kid came to you and said, these are all the things that I'm doing, I feel lazy, what would you tell that kid? And I was like, I would probably cry to hear one of my students putting that much pressure on themselves. But I would also like ask them to be more compassionate and to be kind to themselves. But she helped me realize in that moment that I could not extend that to myself. That I was refusing to extend that to myself. So whether I'm thinking about my inner child or I'm thinking about a student that I love and I care about, it helps me practice more self-compassion, to understand that I have to practice what I'm preaching. I have to, not just for the sake of integrity, but for the sake of sustainability. If I want to be a public influencer for kids, I want to have a long life. I want to have a long work career where I've made a lot of impact, but I can't do that if I'm not taking care of myself.
Yeah, simply for the sake of your life,
Mhm.
your actual life on this planet, which is very short and
Mhm.
precious to begin with, as you know, someone who's experienced a lot of death. It's very precious, extremely. And so, yes, like you're saying, wildly important to go after what you want because you don't have all the time in the world to go after what you want. But in the same regard, right, this is where discernment comes in and sort of
Mhm.
this idea that I like to call dynamic equilibrium, right? You're just walking this
Mhm.
tightrope. It's never completely balanced. You're not just like, oh, this is all good, right? But you have this like dynamic equilibrium where you're trying to create harmony in different areas of your
Mhm.
life. But sometimes this area gets a little bit more, sometimes this area gets a little bit more. But you yourself always have to get enough of you,
Mhm.
or else all of those areas are shit and they're done anyways.
Yeah.
And so I want to backtrack to what you said about recovery. It's super important in this. I coach a 14-year-old baseball team, and I talk about recovery all of the time because there's a stat: the best athletes in the whole world, your LeBron Jameses, all of these guys get 8 hours and 36 minutes of sleep per night. That's their lowest. 8 hours, 36 minutes. And when they go to sleep, they're doing it with deliberate intention. Like, I am doing this because I want to rest. I know that rest is good for me and this is going to be awesome. Right. They're not just like, okay, I guess I'll go to sleep now and maybe I'll sleep well. And if they were
Mhm.
like me, they're like, when I was like trying to rest in the middle of the day, I would shame myself and feel guilty for
Mhm.
resting while trying to close my eyes. And then my eyes would be closed, but I'd be talking shit to myself like, hey, dude, you didn't work hard today. Why is your head resting on the pillow?
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
of course, even if I laid down for 30 minutes, it's not like I was resting at all. My body's even more exhausted because I was just shitting on
Mhm.
myself for 30
Mhm.
minutes. And so we have to come to terms with rest. We have to. Like, the hard work is the rest. Like, that's working really hard, is like
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to put my phone away at 9 o'clock every night. I'm not going to look at it till 7 in the morning. However long that period, that's for me. I'm going to lay down. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to some music. I'm going to hear nature I'm going to watch a nice TV show, whatever it is. And I'm going to get this deliberate amount of rest because
Yeah.
that's important. And I'm going to add a yoga routine or like a tea that I like. And like all of these things, I'm doing them for me so that when I start my day and I enter into this thing that needs me because I'm trying to change the world, then I'm at hopefully at 100% capacity, if not like 80% and up, because there's uncontrollable variables and things like that. But if you're looking at the sports world, which I think a lot of kids are drawn to that because they see their heroes performing at a high level, and like being able to relate it to that way, like your favorite athletes on the planet spend millions of dollars every year on their recovery.
Yes.
That's it. Well, how do you think
Yep.
LeBron James is playing 21 years in the NBA and he's still at full fucking tilt, just absolutely
I
crushing
know,
it?
like, come on, like my body breaks down just watching him play.
And same with Tom Brady. Like, there's like spending millions of dollars. So we can spend 10 hours a day resting and recovering. And that also comes from an embodiment point of view. And that's really what, the basis of what we're talking about is. And I think it's really important. It's really important.
Yeah, that's something I try to help parents with because I think that we don't realize that we are setting kids up in a lot of ways for these patterns. And so often young adults are like, I don't know why I'm like this. And it's like, well, you're brought up in systems and in relationships where these things were kind of mandatory of you. Like asking parents, like, how much time do the kids have for themselves? right? Like, what time period during the day do kids have where there are no expectations for them, right? Where they don't have to think about schoolwork, where they don't have to think about housework, where they can literally have an hour to just be with themselves. And a lot of people, especially my high achievement kids, they are working after school for hours on their homework, or the kids who are supporting their family and raising their siblings, or the kids who are, financially supporting their families, or, like, how much time do kids have to themselves where there are no expectations? And I try really hard to establish that, giving them the space to have that, right? Whether, and they may struggle with it for a little bit, right? Like, I don't know what to do with my time, but that allows them to build that practice of, like, this is my time, like, this
Mm-hmm.
is my dedicated alone time. So I agree with you 100% around the recovery thing. And I think it's so important to recognize that this is a crucial part of growth. That if we want to expand more, if we want to build our capacity more, that we have to rest and recover more. This time period that I've had for the past, I'm developing a docu-series idea, and one of the things I want to do is I want to do a traveling, like, speaking tour that's either attached to it or around it. But I was talking to my therapist about, like, how much time I'm taking sleeping, and, like, I need to get out of bed and blah blah blah. And she kind of, like, just asked me, like, when you are touring, are you going to have this time? Like, are you going to have time to, like, take breaks and call your days off? Like, if you're giving speaking tours and you're filming your show, like, will you have that time? And I was like, probably not. Like, and then she kind of helped me realize, well, this is like recovery time. Like, you need to lean into the resting because you're about to push yourself into a next thing. So if you're beating yourself up when you're supposed to be resting, what's going to show up when it's time to do your show? You're
Mm-hmm.
going to do your show and you're going to be exhausted. And then you're going to be speaking at schools and you're going to be exhausted. And then you're going to push yourself to the point where something is going to collapse and you're not going to be able to do either of these things that you want to do. So then when we had that conversation, the first time I laid down after that, I was like excited. It was like, ah, rest, time to recover, right? Like, allowed myself to just recover and feel good about it. And so that's like these next couple of weeks, like, I don't care what is going on with my projects. I don't care what is going on. I'm taking my time off. I'm not responding to emails. I'm not responding to DMs. I love the students I work with. They have to wait 2 weeks until I'm back. There's no emergency. Like, that I'm willing to give up, right? And I know that that sounds really bad, but also I have to do it. I have to do it. I can't save everybody. I can't be this Superman person because I don't have those capabilities, and it's not healthy to model that for kids. I don't think that that's healthy to model that you have to work yourself to exhaustion. I was just listening to that book I told you about earlier, and they were talking about this anime called My Hero Academia. And
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love that show, but it's about a group of kids who are becoming heroes. And there's the main character who literally, like, beats himself to death. Like, every time he's pushed through this challenge, he is, like, broken and bloody. And it's like glorifying this, where it's like you push yourself until you have nothing left to give. And I never really thought about it because I was like, well, I like his appreciation and his hard work. But just thinking about, they don't show the rest, they don't show the recovery. They just show this guy, like, eating shit every time he's fighting and just, like, really glamorizing that. And it's like, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to come home from a work day and collapse, or I don't want to be up with anxiety dreams or anxiety thoughts all night, or, having mysterious symptoms and illnesses because I'm pushing myself so hard. Like, that's not what I want to preach to kids.
Yeah. Because, for you, this has been a reoccurring bout of burnout and exhaustion. And so I'm glad that you're finally viewing it in a different way moving forward this time. Because it does. We have to learn hard lessons in life. And sometimes whatever you might believe in, God, spiritual, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Someone is pushing these lessons in your face until you're like, all right, I'm going to see it. I'm going to do it. I'm
Mhm.
going to feel it and I'm going to lean into it. And I'm so glad that you're finally leaning into it because just from, I met you on a call a couple months ago and now having this conversation with you, um, you're a joy to speak with. The work you're doing is incredible. And so I hope and pray that you take as many breaks as you need so that you can be your full self for yourself mostly, and then spreading that light and that joy and that meaning and that purpose to every kid that you come in contact with. And so and also in terms of modeling sort of these behaviors for kids, embodying these behaviors, I agree with that 100%. And I've shared this story before, but I think it's relevant to this conversation. As I told you, I coach baseball, and so I've watched a ton of coaches coaching the game of baseball where it's a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes, especially for young kids playing the game. It's a very hard sport. And so the coach will be watching his kids play and they'll make a mistake, an error, or throwing error, whatever, have a bad swing. And he'll be like, hey, it's all right, bud. You'll get him next time. And then take his bucket of baseballs and throw them as hard as he can into the dugout.
Mm.
So he's not modeling what he's saying. His actions don't line up with his words. And then his kid comes back in the dugout. He goes to bat. He strikes out. And now he takes his helmet and he throws it against the cage and he slams his bat against the ground. And the coach is like, "What are you doing? We don't act like that here. What are you talking about, coach?" The kid's not going to say this, but he's like, "You literally just did that. So I'm just doing what you did. I'm just modeling your behavior." And then I go home and I get a bad grade on my test. So I break my pencil and I throw it across the room. My mom tells me I have to do chores and I don't want to. So I yell at her. Where am I learning all of these things? From one simple behavior that a coach displayed at a 12-year-old baseball game that you thought was inconsequential, but it had so many downstream effects on this young person. So taking on the responsibility of being around young people and coaching them and teaching them it's hard because they are absorbing everything. And again, we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect. And that's something that we can pass on as well. But we have to be aware of our words and how our actions align with those words. And I say this, I have another podcast specifically about baseball, and I say this all the time. If you're not willing to bear that responsibility, this sort of deep honor about just shaping people for the rest of their lives, that they will remember forever the actions you had, then please don't get into this. Because you don't coach baseball for the money, right? Hopefully not, because you're not, that's a whole different subject. But anyways, off that, like that's the idea, right? And it's like we have to take that much pride in it. And we can only take that much pride in it if we have a full bout of energy inside of us to do that. Or else we make loose mistakes and we say sort of the wrong thing because we're tired and we're exhausted and we haven't eaten right and we haven't slept and we haven't nourished ourselves in any sort of way. We haven't given ourselves the own self-compassion. And so all of that stuff is it's just it's game changer and it's life changing and it's very important. And so I'm really, really, really glad to have this conversation with you where you're committing to this break where you can be the light that you are and you want to be and that you've been doing on very little energy and will do moving forward on lots of energy. And it's amazing. Imagine what you will be able to do next,
I
man.
know, that's what I keep thinking. I was like, damn, y'all been getting this good with limited energy. Imagine what it will be like if I'm at my full game. But yeah, I think when I think about being a public figure for kids, I want to model growth. And growth means, because I don't believe in the perfect stuff. I don't believe in any of that. It just doesn't make sense to me. There is no perfection in humans. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think just showing kids that I can work on something or I can get better or I can learn things and then articulating that stuff is really important. I stream video games on Twitch because that's where a lot of kids are, but also because it's a practice ground. Because I do a lot of negative self-talk there, right? And it's a lot of it requires a lot of growth mindset. And then having the kids witness reframing that, having kids witness moments of self-compassion, having kids witness like me being kind to myself, like modeling these things, but not coming from this place of power. Like I have all the answers, you need to listen to me, but like I'm a person like you who's out here trying and learning and growing, and let's lift that up. I don't claim to be a perfect person in any sense. And I've had a lot of pushback from people I've worked with who have been like, don't tell people that you don't know things, or don't tell people like how you're feeling, like don't tell people like that you're struggling. My boss, when I had that whole really rough period in my life where I failed out of grad school and I was living in my car. This woman who I had worked with for like 10 years at that point, I like considered her a second mom. I had been posting about struggling and asking for support on Facebook because I needed help. And she was like, you sound like a victim. That was the feedback she gave me. She was like, we all suffer, but you're being loud about it and you sound like a victim and that makes you look weak. And I was like, cool, I'm quitting. Like that was my sign to quit because how could you say that to someone that you care about who is
Mm-hmm.
going through, after I put so much into that company, who's going through so much like struggle, to then tell them that you look like a victim, right? And so it's like when I ask for help, I want to show kids that it's okay to ask for help, right? And that emotional safety is so important to create when you're working with kids. Even when we make mistakes as adults, owning it, saying I made a mistake, apologizing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Model that for kids. So when kids make mistakes, they can own them, they can apologize, they can hold themselves accountable. They watch all of that. They watch everything.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime someone pushes back on kids and say, well, these kids these days, who created them? Like these kids didn't, they weren't just born and suddenly had all these different weird ways of being. Like they are a product of society,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the expectations we're putting on people. When you talk about mental health with kids, the big conversation is social media. And absolutely, social media is a huge thing to pay attention to when it comes to mental health. But let's also talk about academic expectations and pressures that have always been mental health issues for kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have multiple things that we never even had to deal with as young people, like on top of what they are having to deal with. And I think it's just really important to model this stuff and to show humanity to kids so kids can embrace that in themselves and not take it out on themselves, not beat themselves up because they're feeling low or be tough on themselves because they're struggling or push themselves to the point of exhaustion for the sake of what, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking on this responsibility.
It's an honor. Anything to help these kids.
It is an honor, right? It's like it's you just see so much like light and joy in these kids. And I don't know if there's a better feeling of seeing a kid get something,
I
you
love
know,
it.
whether him like slightly reframe the way he talks to himself. Like he's just making a little bit of progress,
Mhm.
instead of saying, oh, I freaking sucked today. He's like, okay, I can do better next time. Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I love
yes.
it. It's my
Oh,
favorite.
come on.
Like
Come
I
on,
wish I could
baby. Let's
wrap that
go.
up in a Christmas box and
Oh,
give that to me. Just like that's what I want to see, right?
oh, it's like, yes, I see a kid strike out on the field and he comes in the dugout and he's a little upset. Obviously, he struck out, right? Anger is fine. We
Real,
don't push that away, but we channel
real.
it. He's like, okay, now I'm going to go cheer on my teammates because they're part of me and I'm part of this team. And now I'm going to get my energy to them. Oh, beautiful. We didn't win. Okay, we're going to show up tomorrow. I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to keep showing up. All of that stuff is like, oh, it's like the most. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I guess I'd imagine if you have your own kid, like it feels like that all the time, I guess.
Yeah, that seems like too much for me. Like having my own. Like I know we're about to leave, and I'll share this with you. I had a student about several years ago. She was in seventh grade and eighth grade when I taught her. And she was the kind of student where like the teachers would get annoyed with her because she was always like pushing in terms of like, it's not good enough or let me do more. Like we'll say like write 2 paragraphs and she'll write 3 pages. And it's like, we appreciate the effort, but you're honestly like putting more work on your teachers. Like, don't do that. We only need 2 paragraphs, but she just had this like effort. I have to push. I have to push. And she was working herself to exhaustion all the time. And then I worked with her a lot on self compassion and I worked with her on taking better care of herself. And she reached out to me years later and asked me to come speak at a well being assembly for the kids that she and a couple other students were putting on. And she was in high school and she was holding space for like mental health and like being kind to yourself and being compassionate. And I was like,
It's
the
unbelievable.
whole time just to see that she had internalized it and then wanted to help other people with it
Yeah.
was amazing. And asking her how things were going, she didn't jump to her academics. She was like, here's how I feel, here's how I'm treating myself, here's how I'm trying to like, be better to myself or try to grow as a person. And it was just so cool to see that impact kind of show up in the ways that she was already sharing that while she was still in high school, you know?
Incredible. Man, I could talk to you all day of like I didn't get to
No.
any of my questions.
This is how it always goes on podcasts with me. I don't know why it's like that.
No, it's brilliant, man. You're so easy to speak to and you listen and that's like brilliant, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So when you're done with your break, I would love to just connect again. It doesn't have to be for a pod. It can literally be just I just want to see how it went
Yeah.
and talk to you again anytime. But thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with me. This was a brilliant conversation. I really appreciate you, your work, your time, your effort, your energy, your attention, all of that. It's amazing. So thank you.
Well, mirror back up to you, man. Same goes for you. I really appreciate the opportunity and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I'm excited to see how we can collaborate and work together in the future.
Absolutely. Please stay in touch and best wishes. Take care of yourself. And we'll see everyone next time. Take care. Cheers. Thank you.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to that episode. If you enjoyed it, click here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love.